I would like to get Mary Lynn's origin story. So, you know, how did you first get into the industry? Were you an actor, writer, singer, dancer, sculptor, spelunker? Like,
Yeah.
what angle, what was your angle into the industry?
Way back. Well, I grew up in LA and I grew up in the industry. My dad was in television, a television producer, worked in kind of was one of the pioneers of videotape. Anyway, I
Oh,
grew up around it. And then I started doing on-camera commercials in my teens into college, and that's how I paid for college. I was an on-camera commercial actress besides waitressing and all through college. I loved it. It was fun. I knew nothing about voiceover back then. I was a broadcast journalism major and I wanted to be a news reporter, but when I graduated school, I couldn't really get a job. And then I saw a job listing for an assistant agent, and I thought, well, I could do that because I've
mhm.
had agents all my whole life, those past few years. And I knew what that relationship was like. Well, it turned out it was as an assistant voiceover agent for Don Pitts. And Don, back in the day, was the man that sort of started the whole business of voiceover agenting, because people used to just have like their theatrical agent get you
Mhm.
commercials and things, or commercial agent. So he was the man. I mean, and his clients were the who's who of the voiceover industry way back when. Animation, announcers, everything. And Don, he was just such a great guy. He was really chill. He used to just, yeah, you go in the booth, go direct Casey Kasem. Yeah, go run that session with Orson Welles. And I was, 22 years old. I'm like, okay. And I did it. I had a lot of confidence. I wasn't afraid, and I really fell in love with the world of voiceover. But after a couple years, I decided agenting wasn't really for me. And I got offered a job at the Voicecaster, which at that time was the only voice casting company in the country. You
Mhm.
know, this was pre-internet. So ad agencies would just hire the Voicecaster, and so all day long we were casting. I mean, I could be in the booth casting 3 radio commercials in the morning, an animation series in the afternoon, a narration project, and then the next day a movie trailer, the animation series. I mean, it was just nonstop. So I fell in love with it. But after close to 2 years there, I decided, and after a lot of encouragement from agent friends of mine, I could do this myself. So I opened up my company, Voices Voicecasting, and I've had that ever since. And then I also got back into performing in voiceover. I would have some ad agency producers go, I like your voice. Make sure you read on that. I don't put myself on stuff I cast because I always feel like that's a little bit weird, obviously.
Mhm.
But got an agent, and I've been with DPN now for years. When they were with that ICM, I was with William Morris for a while, and back with DPN, and I love them over there. They're great. So yes, I know what it's like to be on both sides of the glass. I know that. And I've been coaching for about 25 years and just absolutely love doing that and just kind of nurturing talent and working with talent that way. And I think I come at it from a very unique perspective because I know what it's like to be in front of the mic. I know what it's like to work with the clients. I know what's trending. So and I think I'm a very good coach too. So I have a lot of fun and I bring a lot to the table. And yeah, so that's kind of my
Cool.
origin story.
Why do you love casting so much? What is it? What's the appeal?
Gosh, it's so creative. I love getting that call and them saying, okay, we're looking for the new voice of this.
Mhm.
And then, it's very collaborative. And we all, I work with the ad agency producers, copywriters, account execs, and we're all just sort of pulling our thoughts together and extrapolating these ideas. And then I go off based on those ideas of theirs and then start casting, and I'll throw the net out and start doing that. And I
Mhm.
just love I get so excited. I still get, it's been 30 something years. I still get so excited to get a call like, yeah, we want you to cast something. Because it fuels that creative side of me. And it's very rewarding when you do find the voice of something and then you see it on TV or whatever. So that's really fun. I love that thrill.
Cool. So I know this is confusing for me when I started my voiceover journey. So I'd love you to talk us through it. We were because we were I was telling everybody, before everybody before we jumped on, we were talking about what we were talking about, and I used the term signal chain, which is signal chain is what happens, what connects for me talking to my microphone right now until it goes through all the things until it comes out on my computer as audio. So, Marilyn, if you could explain to us what's the casting signal chain. So here's starry-eyed little Tom Deere sitting over here waiting by the phone or or his email inbox, waiting for that Pepsi casting notice. And then on the all the way on the other side of the signal chain is this, let's not even say the Pepsi spot, the idea, or even before that, the product. They've got
Right.
a new Pepsi cherry or whatever,
Yeah.
lime or vanilla. There's a new thing. So what's the signal chain from that idea of this new Pepsi thing to getting that phone call or email for me to audition for that Pepsi spot?
So there's a lot of steps there. So initially, like say it's Pepsi and they have that new flavor, just cherry Pepsi. So it's all the Pepsi people, then they're gonna reach out to their marketing people. They reach out to their ad agency. Sometimes they'll go, you know what? We used that ad agency on that last campaign. Let's go search for a new ad agency. And then that's when all the, hubbub starts where ad agencies start bidding for that job because that's a big account. So let's just say they find the ad agency, then they start collaborating. We have this cherry cola and we want this and our vision is that. And, they start, hashing it out with the ad agency, of course, who's very creative minded. And the ad agency says, okay, well, if we do a radio commercial, it'll sound like this, and a TV commercial, it'll look like this. And so that's what they do on their end. They start working on all the creative stuff, and the ad people, they assign it to a producer. A producer then has his team, his or her team on that ad agency, which would include maybe another producer, maybe, some art people, copywriters, account execs. There's lots of different roles within an ad agency that flesh out a commercial. And then when it comes down to kind of how they get to me, so let's just say it's a TV spot. They've got this commercial. They've worked on storyboards, which are almost like, I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they look almost like cartoons, and they draw everything out. Then they'll go, if there's the on-camera element, they'll go and start casting the on-camera actors. They'll find the locations, they'll shoot that commercial. Voiceover is the very last thing that's done in a production. Usually during that time when they're filming the commercials, when they reach out to the casting director. Sometimes they'll send the auditions directly to an agent, but hopefully they'll reach out to me and they'll say, and usually it's a producer I've worked with before, they know me or something, and they'll say, hey, we're working on this new campaign for Pepsi. This is what we want. Are you available? And, I go over the kind of business things with them. How many actors are you thinking? What's your budget? Is it union, non-union? All the particulars. Where is it going to run? What's the exclusivity? The business part of it, especially if it's a union job. What's the actor going to get paid? What's the casting director going to get paid? And so all within those parameters is then where I launch. So after I've had my meeting with them, then I'll meet with the creative people, who's usually the like a producer and a copywriter. And we start to flesh out the script, and they'll tell me, I'm looking for this kind of voice. We have an idea. And a lot of times I start then picking their brain. Like, do you have a celebrity prototype? Would you like it if the person ad-libbed a little bit? Would you like, I try to get as much information I can from those creatives so that then I can translate that into casting specs to then send on to the actors. After I get all that, my brain just starts working too. I've done this for so long that when they start telling me things, I'm already writing names down because I just know certain people's voices in my head. And then after I get all that and I kind of, streamline it, condense it into, a smaller, because I don't like to send out really verbose specs. I like them short.
Me too.
And yeah, because I know some people really like those super duper long specs. And I think that tends to cloud the actor's performance. So I streamline that. Then based on those directions and that casting spec that they're thinking of, then I reach out to the ad agencies that I know the talent agents I know that have that talent. Sometimes I'll reach out to students of mine because I have some wonderful students who don't have agents. They're great, but they just don't have agents. And that's when I start sending the copy out. Copy goes out. I'll say, get it back to me by, Thursday. I start getting all those auditions back. And I typically, if it's just one role, I get anywhere, again, depending on the casting budget, but anywhere from 200 to maybe 500 auditions.
Wow.
And then when I get all those on the first pass, I'm only listening to your first line. I don't listen to the whole thing. I can tell from the first line, does he have the right voice? Does he fit the specs? Is he doing something interesting? Did he pull me in? And this is where I always tell actors it's so important to make your audition stand out, because sometimes all we ever hear is that first line. So I
Mm,
usually take that 500 after I've listened to the first line and narrow that down to usually about 50. Then I'll go and listen to those 50 guys' whole auditions, narrow that down to usually like 20-ish, pick my top 10 to 15 and send that to the client. So I
mm-hmm.
still have a little bit of a backup, but that's usually the process.
I'm curious, how many voice actors in 2024, so you get 500 of these, how many of them disqualify themselves immediately because of the technical quality of their
Oh
auditions?
gosh. Um, Maybe 20%.
So 100 out of 500
Yeah, could
don't even
be.
even if they have a good performance, they've already hosed themselves because the vast majority of recording sessions are now done at the voice actor's home.
Yeah,
So that's an important lesson, everybody. They're not just auditioning you. It's not just about your talent or your performance choices. It's also the quality of your home recording studio.
absolutely. 100%. And the other thing that kind of wipes you out of the, being in the final pack is not paying attention to the casting specs and the directions.
Mm,
Because I have some ad agency clients are really particular and they want the files labeled a certain way, and it's their protocol and I have to respect that. So I
right,
really stress that in the casting specs. And it sometimes really blows my mind that some actors just completely disregard it. And it's like, I'm on your side. I want you to book this.
right,
And so if I really know the actor super well and I have time, I might reach out to them privately and say, hey, just resubmit this or relabel this. But
right.
most of the time I don't.
Here's the thing about that is that I tell my students is that the number one skill of a voice actor is the ability to listen. And they usually think that means, oh, listening to the cartoon director so you can make the funny sound. No, I mean, yes, taking direction from your director when you get the booking is great, but the ability to read a casting notice, follow the rules is incredibly important because if you can't get that right, they're not going to entrust you with this cherry Pepsi spot. Because
Mhm.
if you can't take direction in something as relatively simple as how to label this Tom Deere, underscore Pepsi underscore MLW, Mary Lynn Wissner,
Yeah.
or SC for Source Connect or NYC or whatever it
Right.
is, if you can't get that right on the first pass, they're not going to work with you. So
That's right.
because voice acting, it's all acting is attention to detail, and that's
Yeah.
that's one of them. So you say about 20% because of the
In a
technical quality, and a big
technical,
chunk.
yeah, poor sound quality, or maybe they didn't edit something. There was a phase going around. It seems to have faded out a little bit, but it was driving me crazy where some people were cutting out every single breath. And
Mm.
it drove me nuts because most people don't edit that great. And so that you don't allow for like a room noise situation or something, and it just sounds weird.
Right.
So I would just there was one particular agency that did that, and I just never could submit their people
Hmm.
because of that. So
Interesting.
it's yeah, certain things like that. It's not that hard really to just pay attention to the directions. If you have to take a highlighter and just make sure you kind of highlight the main things and put it right in front of your face. And then make sure your sound quality is really good because the competition is just too fierce.
Hmm. It's funny. I tell my students that I truly believe that there is no competition in the voiceover industry. There's plenty of work for everybody that knows that what they're doing, but the question is, do you know what you're doing? And if you don't know what you're doing on a performance level, on a technical level, on a taking direction level, you've competed against yourself and you've lost.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I didn't realize how much of an influence because I have agents, I have managers, I see casting notices on casting sites, I get casting notices directly from producers, production companies, and recording studios. So there's a huge range of
Right.
formatting for casting specs. But I didn't realize you had such. I mean, so what percentage of the time are you writing the casting spec from scratch, and how much of it is them just sending it to you and you're just forwarding it to the
Oh,
agent
I
or
always
to your students?
rewrite it.
You always rewrite it.
Most of the time because gosh, that's a good nobody's ever asked me that. I try to rewrite it in some sometimes the way that I've gotten casting specs from clients, it's not really an actor speak, if that makes sense.
Mm, Yeah, yeah.
So
So you have to
I
translate.
try to, yeah, like, sometimes they go on and on and on about how he's your best friend and he's this and that. And I just say, look, he's a real guy. Be yourself.
Right.
So try to not simplify it, but just make it not so um overwhelming for the talent.
Crystallize it, maybe
Yeah,
consolidate it.
it's because sometimes they get, and I know this just because I work with actors in coaching, that it's most of them get so stuck up, stuck on the verbiage, and it's just
Hmm.
like, relax, relax, just be yourself.
Yeah.
All in all, you can usually glean from the directions. Oh, just be myself. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
just be
funny.
this warm and friendly guy. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Last
that's what I do.
well, 2023 was my best revenue year for
Oh, good.
commercials. It was my best commercial revenue year.
That's nice.
And one thing I noticed is because I'm noticing that I also auditioned, I think, over 1,800 times in 2023.
Whoa, that's
That's
amazing.
between casting sites, agents, managers, and direct relationships with clients. And I've noticed that. And what's interesting is my representation bookings have gone up. And not all those commercials came from agents. Some of them did, but I've noticed that the more often that you audition, well, that's not necessarily true because the more often you audition, if you're doing a bad job, you're just going to keep doing a bad job and reinforcing
Right,
bad
right.
bad habits. But the one thing I've learned the most is the more that like they don't hire a voice actor, they hire Tom or Sally or you know what I mean? They want you to be you because you're either you're playing a character that has a name, which almost very rarely happens in a commercial, right? Or if they know who you are, you're not a voice actor. You're a celebrity endorsing Cherry Pepsi.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
now, but they don't, they want to, I call it a little, they want the dirt on the potato. Not that you're umming and ahhing, but they want you and they want
Right.
what you're talking about to come
You in the
to come
moment.
from you.
Yeah.
Right. So most of the time it's just, it's be you. Sometimes it's you a little louder. Sometimes it's you a little sadder. Sometimes it's you a little more concerned, but it's always you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I always tell actors they ultimately we want it to sound like it was a snippet of your life. And in this moment, what? They made a commercial out of that? Who knew? So how would you, be in that moment as that person reacting that way? So it's a good way to because what most people do is, I think you and I talked about this before.
Hmm.
They always automatically they go into the booth and they just put on their pretty voice and they don't do themselves.
Yes, we talked about
And
that. I called it my Tom Plus voice,
yeah,
which
I
is
always
my
think
gr
pretty
which
voice.
right, which is my explainer video voice
Right,
most
but
of the
not
time, and
commercial.
it's my e-learning voice most of the
Right.
time. But that's where my connection with booking better with commercials is because I was putting away Tom Plus, which has its place in certain genres, but they want Tom for the commercials.
Right, exactly.
You know what I
Exactly.
mean? I am doing a terrible job here, and I'm going to tell you why. Because our friend David just wrote, I keep typing questions and then you ask better ones.
Oh.
Because well, I was genuinely curious. I mean,
That's
I didn't
good.
have any pre-planned
That's a good
questions
problem.
except for the signal chain question. I didn't have any specific questions. They were just coming to me as you were talking about it. But so I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let our lovely viewers ask some
Oh,
questions. So, well, David, thank you very much for joining. And yes, I'll try to cut down on my questions. But oh, Allie, one of my students. Hi, Allie. Allie has a question about breath. Can you talk a little bit more about what is acceptable? LOL. I have heard some people say they leave them in, some make them quieter. What are your thoughts
yeah.
on that? Well, you touched on this briefly, but I'd love to hear more.
I guess there's a part of me, it's like, why are we even worrying about this? We're humans, we breathe. I actually find it more noticeable and distracting when people take out the breaths
Mm,
because it sounds weird. Now, yeah, I mean, if you did a big gasp, of course, edit that out. But there's programs like I know Isotope has a thing you can like lessen it. I think that's what she was talking about.
hmm.
Maybe if you got like a breathing thing where you are breathing every third word or something weird, like, yeah, that's fine. Take it out. But it's very normal to breathe. It sounds more not natural when we don't hear breaths in there.
Hmm.
So I would say if it's distracting to you, it's probably going to be distracting to someone else, but I bet you not as bad as you think.
It's funny
Yeah.
because I'm a gulper.
Um,
I have large lungs.
are you a
Um,
swimmer?
well, it's okay. Well, funny story. So, I had kidney stones, and I had to go to the hospital and I had to get X-rays. Well, I didn't know what was going on, so I had to take
Yeah.
X-rays. So they took chest X-rays, and I'm 5'9". I'm average male American height. I'm not particularly,
Yeah.
but I'm average height.
Yeah.
And and the radiologist said, "You have the lungs of an Olympic swimmer." And she's
Woo.
like, "I could not fit them in the frame." And yeah, but here's the reason why. The reason why I have particularly large lungs, this is so crazy. My freshman year of college, I went to Montclair State University, got my bachelor, my BFA in theater, and I took a singing class, an intro to singing class. And the singing teacher taught us how to expand our rib cage without expanding our lungs. So if you expand your rib cage, you get greater lung capacity. So also I was, doing my share of musical theater and projecting on stage. So I was developing this ability, and lungs are like they're literally kind of balloons. So they are
Yeah. Yeah.
malleable. So I've been, developing my my rib
Whoa.
cage expansion. So my lungs have just gotten bigger. So I have a pretty good lung capacity. The problem with that is that I'm frequently a gulper, so I either cut them. I more often not I cut them. But what I'm also doing, I'd love to, and I'm going to ask you this question. Sorry, David, I'm going to ask this question. Sorry if I'm going to beat you to it. Is that if it says it's a 30-second spot or a 15-second spot, when we are editing our audition, how close do you want it to be to 15 or 30
Yeah.
seconds?
Um, I always say this, don't let your performance get in the way of the timing.
Mm,
Unless they say specifically, because sometimes they do. I have had clients say, make sure the talent gets this in at 27.5 seconds, and then I'll make sure to say that on the audition specs. But if you go over a half a second or you're under a half a second, no, they don't care. It's an audition. We know
because they
that.
don't have the stopwatch when they're listening
Right,
to the time. They're
right,
listening for your
exactly.
performance and
Yeah.
your technical stuff.
Exactly. And sometimes I've had clients, they have completely overwritten the script, but they don't know that really until they start getting all the auditions back and they're going, yeah, everybody's coming in really long. We're going to need to edit this. So I would say err on the side of giving a really great performance than worrying too much about the time. And
Hmm.
you know what I found too? Most people never go over more than like 4 or 5 seconds
Mm.
unless they're ad-libbing a lot and adding, all this extra stuff.
Right. Where are you when it comes to ad-libbing pre-life and lead-ins with
I
the with
love it.
auditions?
I'm kind of known as a casting director that loves it. If it's a real person read or one of those dry, snarky guys,
Hmm.
and if it makes sense. Some people know I like ad libs, and then I'll get auditions back, and they're doing this whole long lead in, and you're like, okay, I get it. You can lead it, do a lead in. And it's kind of too long. And then they'll do a bunch of ad libs in the middle, and it's just like too much. But
Mm.
if you give me a little lead in at the top, it's a great way to break up the monotony of the casting session because you came in with something different. And then it's kind of like code for good acting, because
Mm.
the real person read and the dry snarky read are the two reads where they're the more acting, actorish of the popular directions. So, and you'll see that sometimes in casting specs. I usually try to put that in casting specs just so the actor has a little bit of an extra, reassurance that it's okay. I'll say, feel free to improv or ad lib.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Cool.
but make sure it makes sense. Don't do it just for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, and I've seen that with students is they'll do a lead in and it kind of has nothing to do with the
Yeah, and that
copy, and
doesn't
then
work.
they kind of like pause, and then they
They
start
do the
the
script. Yeah,
then they
that's the
start the
worst.
script. So it's like
Yeah,
that's not there's no connection between the lead in and then the
yeah,
actual read. So it
that's
needs
not
to be
helping.
organic,
Correct.
and you don't lead in for the sake of leading in either. You do it
Correct.
if it makes sense, because sometimes the beginning of a script is, they ask a question, and like maybe that question is the beginning of the conversation. So it makes sense to start it there,
Yeah,
or if they're musing about something at the beginning of a script, then maybe ask yourself the question that you're answering that is the beginning of the script, right?
exactly. Exactly.
Cool. Gideon, Hello, Gideon. He says, "Hi, Tom. Hi, Mary Lynn. Do you have any tips for self-direction? If I'm being myself, how can I be more myself? Thanks in advance." Excellent question, Gideon. What do you got?
Well, it kind of goes back to what you were just saying. I actually had an app out there. I just took it out this year because I wanted to redo it, but I had an app out there for a few years, actually 10 years, I think it was, on self-directing. But if you like what Tom was just saying, if you know how they always say to us, you've got to talk to somebody, act like you're talking to somebody. And that's true, that works. But so many times I hear actors go, yeah, I was talking to my best friend, but it still didn't sound like they were talking to somebody. But if you
Mm,
treat your copy kind of like it's a response, no matter what the direction is, it's putting yourself into the script. So even if it's a straight authoritative read, for, I don't know, Citibank or something, if you still kind of treat it like somebody, the person you're talking to, asked you a question, the way you respond, say the casting spec said be authoritative, the way you respond is your own self-directing. It's you talking the way you would talk in that situation.
mhm.
So I find that's kind of the easiest way to help uh, talent direct themselves. There's what I teach, in my coaching is the 5 popular directions, which are all, how commercials are made. Um, which you'll learn in coaching, but 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 it's how you interpret those directions and how you act them, because it's not just, you know, talking those directions. You have to be able to interpret those directions and then take that script and make that script come to life with that being your motivation. So it's tricky. It's not easy, but it does definitely is something you can do. And sort of the fast track way is to always come at it like, okay, if I was talking to my friend and he asked me a question, this is how I would respond in my authoritative way, or this is how I would respond in my snarky, sarcastic way, or whatever the casting spec requires.
Right. And it's like, what mood are you in when you're getting this information? That can be your casting spec. So if
Hmm.
you're like if you're in a good mood today and someone's, talks to you about the new CVS app, it's like, "Hey, you know what? I just heard about this app. It's really cool. It does this, and it's this. Why don't you come on down to CVS or jump online, Google Play Store and check it out for yourself," or
Yeah.
something like that. Or if you're like,
Yourself in the scene.
right, setting the scene. You're in a bad mood, or it's like, oh my God. And then CVS is the answer to get you out of the bad mood, the CVS app. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
what did Mad Men say?
Feeling.
Advertising is all happiness. So it's
Yeah.
like, what's gonna get what get either you're not happy and then the product gets you to the happy, or you are happy and you're sharing the happy with everybody else. Does
Right.
that make sense?
Totally makes sense. And I always say to actors too, always remember there's a reason you're saying what you're saying. Find the reason.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. Excellent. Thank you, Gideon, for that question.
Thank you.
David, since you go into casting with a pre-imagined idea of how it will sound, how frequently does an actor's unique audition alter your initial vision for a casting? Like, whoa, that works.
A lot of times, because again, depending on the original spec, um, you know, ag- if the actor still has to respect the specs and not go too far off, obviously. But you know, that's why I'm saying like the real person read or that wry, dry, snarky, fun, comedic read are so much more giving and open to creativity from the actor's side, because it's how you're interpreting that. It's like I was saying, it's a little more actory, so you have a little more freedom. So sometimes I hear things from people, I'm like, wow, I didn't know he could be that funny, or, so I think as a talent, those are so much more liberating and fun to do because you're free to be a little bit more creative.
Mm. So I'm sorry, David. Here's another question from me. You can take credit for it. It's okay. How often do you send a casting notice to somebody and they're not the spec? Cross gender,
Oh,
deep
it,
voice, but you send it to somebody who's higher pitched. The
yeah.
client wants somebody older, but you send it to, 480 older guys and maybe 20 younger guys. Like, how often do you do that? And what are
I do
what are
that
often the results?
sometimes. It depends on the client. Like if I have a really good relationship with that ad agency and I know that producer really well, and he like gets me and respects that, in the past I've done some creative things because that's why they hire a casting director. Um, I've cast car ads where they wanted a guy, they were so sure they wanted a guy, and I threw in a couple women because they just had the right sound, but the female version of it, and they booked them.
Mm.
That's happened a few times. Not that often. I'm very respectful. Or if I don't know the ad agency producer, I might say to them, "Hey, I threw in a couple ringers because I thought you might find them interesting." But I
Hmm.
would never throw in more than like two or three.
Right. How often does that help their ear?
I don't know. That's okay. You have good questions, Tom. Um, they've never come back and have been negative about it.
Hmm.
They've been like they've embraced it. Said, "Oh, that was a cool idea," but the client's adamant it's got to be a guy or whatever it is.
Right.
You
I
know, but
assume there's these meetings where everyone's like Sam Elliott. It's got to be Sam
yeah.
Elliott. Sam Elliott or bust. We can't afford Sam Elliott. Okay. And you bring them, 475 Sam Elliots, but you may but like if that comes up, and I'm going to say Ryan Reynolds because that's what I've been casting lately. I've been getting Ryan Reynolds casting
Oh
specs.
yeah, I
How
can.
often will you throw a Ryan Reynolds in there, which is like it's totally against type?
That I wouldn't go too far off that way because type is different than like say um because Ryan's, the sort of the fits the prototype of that, very wry, sarcastic, flip,
Hmm.
smart ass, whereas like a Sam Elliott is just, kind of grumbly down here, folksy guy. They're
Right.
not the same.
Right.
So I don't want to go too far off where they're going to think, what kind of casting? She doesn't know what she's doing. So
Maybe that was a bad example
yeah,
because
I
Sam
wouldn't
Elliott's
go,
never in a bad mood when he does his commercials.
no, he
He's
just
just got
sounds
a
like,
lower register
yeah, and he's pretty
and
much
a
one note. He's
yeah,
one
he's
note, you know?
one hell of a note.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, and Ryan Reynolds, he's usually kind of slick, but he can also be kind of manic
And charming at the same time.
and charming
Yeah.
at the same time, which doesn't describe me at all. But like
Oh,
I've been getting more of these
yeah.
Ryan Reynolds casting specs, and I have been booking some of them lately. And it's not because I'm doing a Ryan Reynolds impression; it's more of his attitude.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Which is
Yeah.
kind of what they're looking for. They're not necessarily because I know I'd like to think that I assume every time there's a casting notice and it says Morgan Freeman, Sam Elliott, Ryan Reynolds, and whatever's on the girls' side because I don't get the girls' scripts that they're not saying we want Morgan Freeman, but he won't take our call or we can't afford
No.
him.
When they
That's not what's happening.
when
We're not all
yeah,
consolation prizes for not
no.
them not
When
getting
they
Morgan Freeman,
when
right?
they ask for those types, it's not that they want an impersonation because then it almost is a mockery in a way.
Mm,
When they ask for, a Ryan Reynolds type or Scarlett Johansson type or Emma Stone or Matthew McConaughey, these are all kind of the current ones we've been getting.
hmm.
It's not that it's what you have to remember is all those people have very unique voice prints.
Mm,
Morgan Freeman has a really unique sound, a very unique voice print. Jeff Bridges does.
mm,
Uh, Sam Elliott, they all have a unique sound. So when they ask for those types, it's that they don't want you to sound like them, but they want, they might want like the low rumbly voice, but there's an attitude that he has and there's a cadence that he has.
mm,
So that's what they mean. It's their somebody could hear their voice and, Susie in the middle of Iowa is not going to have any clue that's Morgan Freeman, but there's something interesting in the way he speaks, in these phrases and so on. So
hmm.
that's why certain celebrities are always prototypes because they have interesting vocal qualities.
Right. So they don't want us to do caricatures or
No,
impressions.
no, because then, like I said, then it's mocking, and then you get into legal issues
Right.
too.
We don't want that. And
Yeah,
that's a
and
whole
they don't
other,
want
no.
that.
Unless they want that. Right.
Yeah, but then, like I said, there's a lot of legalities that
Yeah.
go on.
So they got to be like,
Yeah.
but if they came going in saying we want somebody who can do a Robert De Niro impression, but like you're saying that doesn't come up very often.
No,
Okay.
it's
Which makes
almost like
sense.
it's almost campy when it does.
Right. Right. And everybody who wants to be even if the spot isn't serious, they want the spot to be taken seriously,
Yeah, you're
right?
saying something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're saying something, you're the brand representative, so, there's a responsibility with that, You know what I mean? So cool. David, oh boy, I stole another question. He's like, how do you send a casting notice and they have to spec? Oh, never mind. I'm killing David tonight. I'm so sorry. But he comes back with another great question. How often does a producer come back after casting and said, this isn't just working, can you find someone else?
It happens. It's and again, sometimes they don't know until they start getting auditions back and they go, yeah, it's just not hitting, or you know what? This isn't the voice direction we should have gone in.
Mm,
Or we didn't hear anybody we liked, and then I at least have another round of people that I didn't submit that I can send. Or if that still doesn't hit, we'll do another round of casting. But most of the time, if they come back with a response like that, it's because they realize that particular direction that they gave
mm,
doesn't work with their intent, how they want to portray that product.
right.
So it doesn't happen that often, but it does happen sometimes, yeah.
I get maybe one or two a month. Maybe not even one or two a month. Maybe one a month. Well, like a few days, 3 or 4 days later, I'll get the same casting notice. But yeah, they never change the script almost never changes.
Right. It's a
But
direction.
the direction changes because I think you're right. It's because they're not hitting the notes. But have you
Yeah.
ever had an experience where it actually is the script? It's just not written in such a way that's
Oh,
conducive
God,
to the
yeah.
that
Sometimes,
happens a lot.
we not a lot, but sometimes we'll get really badly written scripts and they think it's, like this incredible, you know, award-winning script. And you're like, okay, sure.
Ah,
And you just have to follow what they want because it's not it's their product. So I try to always be very obviously very respectful of their wishes and what they ultimately want. But if
mhm,
I see something, sometimes, just even grammar isn't right or something, and I might say, do you want them to, that conjunction there? Do you want that, if I can? But at the same time, um, you know, I don't profess to know everything, so I want to I'll voice what I'm thinking, and I kind of want to hear what their response is.
right.
Yeah.
And
It
so it
doesn't
sounds
happen that often, but it has happened.
it sounds like it's a more collaborative
Totally.
experience
Yes.
than I thought it was. So I usually thought it was a for they just forwarded an email to you and said send us 50 people that sound like this.
No, I mean, that's the way, in my opinion, it should be very collaborative because I want them to come back and hire me again.
Right,
If I didn't reach out to them after they sent me a casting, notice what they want and all this stuff, I would think I'm not doing my job, you
right,
know. And I've built up these relationships with some of these producers for decades, so I
right,
want to maintain that.
right.
Um, but
It's
yeah,
it
it's very
that
collaborative.
that's interesting because, a lot of people, especially outside of the industry, have this very shallow perception of LA and casting New York. It's all about connections. You know what I mean? But it's not about connections. It's about relationships. It's
Totally, yeah.
it's a different it's a and what you're describing, this collaborative process. You can only have a successful collaborative process like that if there's a level of open communication and trust, which is the basis for any successful, positive, nurturing, synergistic relationship, right?
Absolutely. And we have to realize too, advertising is like a big thing of musical chairs. Ad people move around a lot. So
Mm,
I might work with him on the Pepsi thing, and then 2 weeks later, he might have just left that, or they went to a new ad agency, or the whole ad agency disbanded. You just never know, and that he's
mhm.
at another ad agency. So, I mean, I've worked with some producers that have been at probably, gosh, 10 different ad agencies since I first knew them.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've had to I've followed people around because, I'll send a marketing email and it'll get bounced and
Yep.
it'll say, so and so doesn't work here anymore. And it'll be like, that's it. So it's like, oh, good. Now I get a chance to actually call the company and talk to them and find out
Right.
who's the new, Bob that was there. And then I'll develop a relationship with that person, then go find where Bob went. And sometimes Bob takes their casting roster with them, and sometimes
Yes.
they're not allowed to. And
Yeah.
sometimes whoever replaced Bob brings their casting roster with them. So this is why you always want to keep up on your marketing and making sure that whoever you're working with, because sometimes a year will go by, I'll be like, whatever happened to Bob? It's like, oh, Bob got replaced, I didn't know it, and
Right.
he couldn't work with me anymore, or something else. Wow, we kind of
Exactly.
Busted through. All right, we've only got 15 minutes left. That went fast. I was going to take half the time to talk about like the casting process, and I want to take the other half to talk about your coaching. So until we get another question, tell me a little bit. I mean, I mean, this is a loaded question because I've worked with you multiple times as a coach to helping me with my commercial reads. But talk us through a little bit, just the basic like sneak preview of what's the process of working with you. And I'm gonna before you answer, I have noticed that there are four types of coaches. There's the drill sergeant, the cheerleader, the therapist, and the professor. So, and you don't have to be all of one. So, what would you say? What percent? I think I know what you are, but what would you say? Cheerleader, drill sergeant, therapist, professor. What would you say? What are you
I,
parts of?
God, that's good. I say I'm a little bit of the last. I think I'm a cheerleader. I think I'm a professor, but I also think I'm a therapist too, a lot of times. I don't
Yeah,
think I'm a drill sergeant.
no, you're
You
not.
know?
You're sweet as pecan pie.
But at the same time, I'm super honest. And this is, I kind of have a policy where I try to only work with working pros. And I don't mean that to be like snobby. It's just that I used to work with beginners years ago, and every once in a while I will, like we've got a really good beginner kind of everything you need to know to get started class coming up. If anybody's
Hmm.
interested, we've got that coming up. But I usually only work with working pros. But this time I'm doing this 2-day class thing. Um, because I'm just so busy and I like working pros because I know I don't have to do some of the rudimentary stuff. And it's
Right.
about getting down to the nitty gritty and working on them with working with them on their performance. So but I'm very honest because I really take a lot of pride in what I do and I don't ever want to string somebody along. And so if I think, you know what, you're just not cutting it, or you really need to go back to take some acting classes, or I'll tell them that because
Hmm.
I always feel my name goes out there with you too.
Right.
And I take a lot of pride in that. If you went to another coach or you went somewhere and said, yeah, I coach with Mary Lynn Wissner, I want people to go, yeah, well, yeah, I get it. Or what was she thinking? That would make me feel horrible.
Sure.
So, I take a lot of, you know, I'm very nurturing that way, but I'm also very honest and, practical. Like this is what you need to know. And I do acknowledge that voiceover, I always say this to my students, voiceover is kind of the one acting genre that a lot of people get into without having an acting background. You're supposed to, but a lot of people get into it without that because they think, oh, I got this great voice. And they don't realize how hard it is until they
Yeah.
start doing it. And because you have an acting background, how valuable that is. But so I've also worked with some talent that way, like, okay, let's just pretend you went to NYU theater school. Now, here's the hacks, tricks, techniques that are kind of going to get you sounding like that, and then
Hmm.
from there.
Right. I will also add on to it's more important than ever for voice actors to have either some level of theater, on camera, improv, and I'm also going to add a relatively new one, opera training, because AI is here.
Yeah, it's
AI
scary.
is here, and like our friend Tim Friedlander, president of the National Association of Voice Actors, says we're about 5 to 10 years too late for to be ready for AI. It's been here and it's been doing its thing. Um, so I've come up with a thing. It's what's called I'm calling a relevance gap. You want to be a relevant voice actor in the industry. AI is going to be diminishing and people who are earlier in their journey and their relevance because the low hanging fruit of low paying jobs on Fiverr, Upwork, Voice123, voices.com, where a lot of people will start to cut their teeth and develop their performance
Yeah,
skills and project management skills and technical skills, a lot of those jobs are going to go away. And if
exactly.
you don't have that acting, theater, improv, possibly opera training to be able to jump over that relevance gap, you're going to be in trouble.
Yes. I
And I think in 2 to 5 years, I think it's going to be a serious problem. I think onboarding for people that don't have that training, it's going to be a serious problem.
and I
So,
also recommend, I'm going to add one more genre
sure.
to is I say go take an on-camera commercial class
Mm,
because the acting that you learn for on-camera commercials it's the exact same acting you want to bring in the booth with you for voiceover commercials because they write the copy the same way. But I always say with on-camera commercials, you're forced to act because there's a camera on you. So you're forced in a good way. So it's kind of like calling you to your, calling you to attention. Whereas in voiceover, we kind of think, oh, thank God, I can just like chill in my booth. Nobody's looking at me. I don't have to move around. But all that acting really does have to be there. So even if you don't ever want to do on-camera commercials, and I get it,
Mm-hmm.
go take a class. It's fun, just learn how to act in a commercial in a 30 or 60-second time frame.
It's funny. I've always felt the opposite about being in the booth and I don't think it takes off the pressure. I think it adds the pressure because now if I'm on camera and I want to be, sly and winky, I can just go. But if I'm doing it with only my voice, I have to wink with my voice.
Yeah, but
How do
if
you
you
do
do that,
that?
if you still do it physically, it comes out in your voice. As you
Yes, yes,
know
it
that
does. Yes,
because
absolutely.
actors don't think it does, but it does. Very
Right.
subtle, like just putting your hands on your hips or
Mm.
flipping your hair.
I, j-
Those
I gesture a lot. I have my dog clicker in my hand. I'm always gesturing
ah,
with the dog
it
clicker.
it causes very subtle intonation and inflection changes in your voice that are enough to aid in you sounding more real and natural. So
Mhm. So yeah, so yes, there's just as much of a pressure to perform in the booth as there is on camera, but take
yes.
your on camera experience and get it in there. And even though you're physicalizing and knowing seeing you and it's in an enclosed space, even just the smallest of gesture can really accentuate your
So
performance.
much more liberating too. It's kind
I
of
think
fun.
so. I think
Yeah.
so too. Absolutely. Allie, another great question from Allie regarding union. If it says union and we are not union, are we allowed to audition to be able to get the credit towards becoming union?
Yeah, I don't know what you mean credit towards, but um if the only time it's ever an issue is if the client says they must be union because they don't
Mm,
want the ad agency, production company doesn't want to go through all the rigmarole, which is really it's not. It's just all they have to do is it's a Taft-Hartley letter. It's really easy. But some ad agencies, they don't want to deal with it, and I respect that. So the casting director will be very specific about that on there. But if you're not union and you're auditioning for a union spot, make sure most agents when I get back casting, they'll say that like next to your name, or he's SAG eligible or something. I don't have a problem with it because I know what it's like. You got to start somewhere. So if somebody is non-union and it's a union spot, I will make sure my client knows, oh, he's a non-union member. And
right.
it's never been a problem. As long as you're always up front.
Right. Quickly to explain, she said Taft-Hartley. What that means is if you're a non-union actor and you are auditioning in a state that is not a right to work state, you
Like
can be
California.
non-union, like California, New York. You
Mhm.
can be non-union, audition for a union gig, book the union gig, and do the union gig without having to join the union. And there's a very limited a number of times that you can do that before you become what's called a must join. And then you are what Mary Lynn just called SAG eligible, which means if you do if you're still non-union and you do a gig, you get booked for another union gig, you have to join the union.
Yeah.
Have to. SAGAFTRA.org has that in more detail, so you should check that out. Excellent question, Ali. Tanya, how would you define beginner?
Somebody who really has never had voiceover experience. Now, beginner could mean you've done on-camera work or stage work or something, but you've never done voiceover work. Or it could just be somebody who's never had any kind of background in any kind of performance and steps in front of a microphone and doesn't know what the heck they're doing.
Right,
So that's what I would call beginner. Beginner, in my mind, is somebody who's never had voiceover training or experience in the booth.
right. It's funny. My definition of a beginner is someone who is not versed in project management.
Yeah.
And what I mean by project management, which is probably the single most
That is
important skill you need to have, is everything that happens from the moment the audition hits your inbox to the moment that the check clears. That is project management. You come in with talent, you may come in with training, but if you don't have actual project, if you don't can't understand or do project management, you truly are a beginner. Because I'll tell you this, your talent can book you your first gig with a client. Your project management skills will book you the next gig with that client. Because if you can't do what needs to be done when it's time to press the red button, you are useless.
Exactly. It's true. Yeah, it's a business. It's a
Hmm.
business.
Yep. A great question, Tanya. Thank you. Max, when a client provides many, many details in the specs, does that indicate they may not really know what it is they're looking for?
Yes, sometimes that does happen. You know, you have to realize that a lot of times it's like a big boardroom, and there's two producers, a couple copywriters, account exec, maybe the casting person, maybe, an art director, and they're all chiming in. I want a guy that's warm and friendly. Okay, warm and friendly. Oh, but he has to be more friendly than warm. Okay, more friendly. And all these like thoughts are getting written down, and then they just get sent to the casting director, and it's up to the casting director, like I was saying earlier, to kind of extrapolate all that and streamline it. I know some casting directors don't do that because I've seen those specs, and I think that's actually doing a disservice to the talent. But you can usually glean from very verbose casting specs, okay, he's a real guy. Okay, he's just a nice consultant, an authoritative guy that knows a lot about investing. Just kind of take those little nuggets from each sentence and then streamline it into maybe one or two thoughts.
Right. And the nice thing, and one thing I've noticed over the past few years is that they'll ask us to do 2 or 3 takes, but they want wildly different reads. So if you have a lot of specs, if it's an over-spec'd spec, you can do some of them in the first take, and then you can
Sure.
do some of the others in the next take.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know? Cool. Thank you for your question, Max. Allie, another great question. Comment about Mary Lynn just said about acting for camera classes. Hardest class I've ever taken, required a lot of improv. Yes. Where do you land on improv as it
Love it.
comes to voice
Love it.
acting?
And a lot of agents I know, especially in the bigger LA, New York market, excuse me. Again, like I was saying earlier, since a lot of people get into voiceover without having a lot of acting background, the first thing they say is go take an improv class.
Mm-hmm.
Um, go take an on-camera commercial class. Go take acting basic 101. Improv, it is intimidating. I totally get that. But it's fun too. If you get in sort of a supportive environment, and there are quite a few voiceover improv classes out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's mostly just sort of like giving yourself the permission to expand on that character. And
Mm.
I always say to my actors, like, remember, it's voiceover. Nobody can see you. So don't be afraid to be weird in your booth. It's okay.
Right. I tell my students that the reason why improv is so critical is because it gives you the ability to make strong decisions quickly.
Yeah.
And you
You can't
don't
think about it.
right, you don't think about it because you're not memorizing your voiceover script, and if you are, that's weird.
That's
Don't do
accurate.
that. don't
Yeah.
do don't do that, because once you're doing that, then you start to get into these really weird interpretations based on how you memorize your scripts, and you may be stressing certain words that make no sense in the context of the character or the setting or the brand or the product. So don't do that.
Dude.
Most don't do that. Most people don't, I'm sure. But because if you do those 3 takes with your audition, I mean, yes, you can have a lot of time to prepare your auditions, which you shouldn't. I say don't take more than 5 minutes on an audition.
Yeah, I
Five
agree.
minutes, because also you're gonna outthink yourself. You're gonna second guess yourself, and you're gonna over edit, and then you're gonna over edit and overtake, and then you're gonna have this destroyed, horrible Frankenstein of a performance and stitched together MP3 file, which will be not good. But
Yeah.
making strong choices quickly, and like I said, if you get 2 or 3 chances to do it with multiple takes, you can do all sorts of different interesting things with it. But yeah, improv is critical. Oh, look at that. We are almost out of time. So this works great. But if you've got any more questions, just type them in real quick. But Marilyn, I wanted to ask you where everybody can find you if
Sure.
they want to work with you.
Thank you. So voicesvoicecasting.com is my website. It's one long word, voicesvoicecasting.com. And then I also host the vopros.com. And that's where we have the pro events are for working pros, where we'll have like agent nights, casting director nights, from promo nights, video game nights, animation nights with experts in those fields, and you can work with them. But then on that VO Pros platform, we also have VO training, VO Pros training. And that's where I do host, we'll do more beginnerish stuff, like I was talking earlier, we've got one coming up, kind of beginner to intermediate level stuff, even things like setting up your home studio or introduction to animation or, things like that. So, but that's all on the vopros.com,
And
thevopros.com. And
and I
my
know
emails are on both of those.
right, and I know you're going on the cruise with Bob Bergen tomorrow. But
Yeah.
what's your next public appearance that's on land?
I know. That's why I'm in a hotel room here. We're going on the VO cruise. Bob Bergen is doing animation. I'm teaching commercial. I'll be at VO Atlanta. I love VO Atlanta. I go every
See you
year.
there.
Yeah, it's so funny. I get to see Tom every year.
Yay.
And that's a fun event. That's kind of, I think, one of my favorite voiceover events because so many people go and it's so great. We never get to see each other. So it's nice to get a hug from your friends, and then there's great panels and classes, and I know my X sessions are sold out, but there's some really great like panels I'll be on.
Hmm.
There's talks, they have vendors, and it's just what I love about it is everybody's there that loves voiceover. So it's all like-minded people.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I will be there. I'll be teaching an X session about making
Yay.
work from home work. So you learn it's literally about workflow and project management. So,
He's the man. He
come,
knows. Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
You're an
So
expert on that.
please come hang out. But like I said, everybody, I've worked with Mary Lynn multiple times as an actual student for commercial voiceover. She's fabulous. I strongly recommend working with her. The next time she has like a webinar or a workshop and you have an opportunity to learn from her and get some live coaching in front of everybody, take that opportunity to do it. I strongly recommend it.
Mm.
So Mary Lynn, thank you so much. This is so great.
Thank you for
Um,
having me. This has
oh,
been fun.
yeah, and you've got some recommendations there. Oh, well, Tanya, we'll see you at VO Atlanta. Dave also recommends working with you because apparently you are awesome sauce. So that's always nice. Um,
Sweet. Thank you.
Also, by the way, I just got an email this morning concerning VO Atlanta. The National Association of Voice Actors has 3 sponsored VO Atlanta tickets, so you can actually apply to attend to the VO Atlanta conference for free. So go to the
Yeah,
NAVA website to check that out.
that was amazing what you're doing. Yeah,
I
that's
know the work
fantastic.
they're doing is just incredible, providing health
Incredible.
insurance,
Yeah,
the AI writer, the Fair Voices Pledge. They're just doing amazing work.
yeah, they're
Oh,
really looking out for.
and shameless self plug for me in 2 days on Wednesday night, I and my good buddy Val Kelly, who I know Marilyn knows, who runs the Mid Atlantic voiceover
Yeah.
webinar, I will be running. I'll be doing a workshop called "Think Like a Voiceover Business," which talks about decision making, how to develop your critical thinking and decision making skills to be an effective voice actor, so you can make thoughtful, informed
Wow.
decisions about your voiceover business. Because all the
Yeah.
questions come up, about pay to plays and about agents and about SAG-AFTRA and about AI and about incorporating. And they post these questions on Facebook, and the loudest jerk in the room tells them what to do, and then they go do it, and then it's a huge disaster because it doesn't align with what they need to realize their
Well,
definition of
what's valuable
success.
about what you're doing is you make it accessible to everybody. And what some of those people do, like you were saying there, is it's what worked for them, but it doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody else. And you have a nice program that does make it accessible to everybody. And it's kind of a formula or like a template. And that is so valuable because we're all out here in this abyss. We're all in our home booths and you've got to treat this as a business. And when you treat it as a business, you get taken seriously. So Tom
That's
has
right.
some really great help with that.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. And Mary Lynn's Voices Voicecasting website is in the description of this YouTube video. So everybody, thank you so much for attending this Ask Me Anything. My next Ask Me Anything event will be February 19th with Maria Pendolino.
Oh, she's awesome.
She is awesome.
Another great business person too. Yeah.
She's great about all things rates, and also when we're going to talk about the political voiceover genre. She has
Perfect.
her own political site, Blue Wave Voiceover.
Right. That's right.
Because I got into political in 2022, and I love it. And it's
Mhm.
also a multi-billion-dollar industry. This is going to be the most amount of money ever spent in political campaigns. So there is just gobs and piles of money just for us voice actors to eat up and talk about how wonderful these candidates are and how horrible those candidates are. But anyway, again, Marilyn, thank you so much. I will see you
Yeah.
in early March at VO Atlanta. And everybody else, thank you so much for coming. Be sure to go to vostrategist.com, book that free 15-minute consult, check out my video library, gear recommendations, subscribe to this blog channel, connect with me on Instagram and LinkedIn. And thanks again for coming. I'll see you next time. Stay cool, stay safe, and happy voicing.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. Woo!